So today's topic is following on with yoga teaching methods. And today we will be talking about communication. So communication, teaching, and learning. So think of this as how to become a successful or more effective yoga instructor, which is very different from a successful yoga practitioner. When we practice yoga, we're just on the mat and it's a conversation between me and myself, and I don't have to think about anybody else in the room. I don't have to compete with anyone else. It's just a deepening relationship with me and myself, which is also a deepening relationship with divine. When it is when you're stepping into the role of yoga instruction, you can't just stay in your own zone, in your own little world, and pretend that there's nobody watching you. You have to be in constant communication with your students, your clients, your audience. So good communication is very important. Beyond exercise instruction, teaching group classes is about establishing and maintaining relationships. And the more you understand how to create this rapport, how to communicate with the participants, the more effective an instructor you will be. So you want your students to feel comfortable with you. You want them to feel that they can speak with you. You want them to feel that you understand them, not just the words that they say, but also their body language, how they are on the mat. And so it's essential to not just be zoning out, giving out instruction, but you need to be observing your students at all times. It's also very essential for the safety of your students within their asana practice, that you're always observing what they are doing. Reading the room, reading the energy of the room is also an essential technique that we need to learn. Good communication is the foundation of successful relationships. Success in the health and fitness industry is dependent on your ability to establish relationships and create a positive rapport so that your students, your clients will keep coming back. Okay. This here is a very important rule about communication. 7%, 38%, 55% rule. What does this mean? So when you're delivering a message, when you're instructing, 7% is the content of words. 38% is the tone of your voice. 55% is body language. Okay, so body language takes up 50%. That's what the students are reading first and foremost. The second thing they rely on, that the receiver, or the student in this case relies on, is the tone of the voice. And then lastly, it's what you're actually saying or what the message is. So this is just how the brain works, how we are wired to interpret signals around us. This is just how the brain has developed. So body language, if body language and your tone of voice and your message are all saying different things, the first thing that the student or the audience will interpret is the body language. So, and then next is the tone of voice, and then lastly would be the weight of the words. So in other words, if your body language is positive, and your tone of voice is positive, even if you're actually um, saying something that's quite negative, it will still be seen as something positive. And then the opposite, if you are actually saying something positive, but your body language and your tone of voice is saying otherwise, that's what's going to be interpreted first. So, for example, I'll make myself a little bit bigger so you can see. Okay, so for example, I'll say to you, your class was really good. Or I can say it this way. Your class was really good. So there's a difference in body language and tone, but the message is the same. So which one did you believe? Your class was really good versus your class was really good. Okay, and then you can flip it around and you can play with it, and just try to observe this. Maybe try it with somebody at home. The 7%, 38%, 55% rule. Okay. So how do we create more positive body language? Certain things we can do. Think about your eyes, eye contact, and facial expression. Are you able to make direct eye contact with your participants, or are you just zoning out? Are you just in your own zone in the mat? Are you teaching with your eyes closed? Or are you actually, sometimes it happens when, for example, we're teaching a very gentle class or a meditation class. You don't want to have your eyes closed all of the time. You can use this as a cue. If you want your students to close their eyes, then you can close your eyes a bit. After a while, there are certain points in the class where you really need to open your eyes and communicate with the students through your eyes, or just open your eyes to observe what's happening in the room. Does your face express enthusiasm? Does it look like you are excited to be there, excited to teach, excited about yoga, or does it look like you're bored and your mind is elsewhere, or you're not happy that the students are there because you would rather have your own time alone? Sometimes it can come across that way. In my own experience, I come from a very old school background, like in yoga, like ashram type of learning, and really serious into your own self. So I used to teach with a lot of seriousness, not because I didn't care about the students or anything. It was because I wanted to impart um, this seriousness as well with the yoga practice, because I love yoga, and I really enjoy the solemnity of it. So for some students it was okay, they got that. For some students it was misinterpreted, and they just thought that that I wasn't communicating well with them. They thought that I was unreachable. Okay, so you just have to balance it. Does your face or your bodily expressions convey the message that you are welcoming your students? Does your face and your facial and your bodily expressions, does it convey that you are interested in your students? Okay, so tone and rhythm of voice as well. Does the tone of your voice include inflections? Does the tone of your voice express confidence and enthusiasm? And does the rhythm of your voice reinforce the rhythm of the class? This is really important. I see this mistake a lot with younger teachers. they sometimes their voice gets very flat and not interesting at all to listen to. It's So you have to balance like the seriousness of the practice with interest. It still needs to be interesting. You're not putting your students to sleep. You as a teacher need to hold the class energetically and also hold the energy of the group with your voice. Another common mistake that I find with new teachers, so one is not using inflections, not having enough fluctuations and interest in their voice. They sort of teach like this, very, very flat. Another one is using their conversation voice while teaching. So you need to have a teaching voice where it's coming from the diaphragm and you are projecting your voice so that everybody in the room can easily hear you, not straining, what is she saying? What did she just say? So it's very easy for them to hear you. That way they will be comfortable. They don't have to put extra effort in trying to understand what you're saying. When you're also speaking from the diaphragm, it conveys confidence when your voice is more rounded, rather than when your voice is like here and it's all coming from your throat and you're not really using the diaphragm. So I can speak like this when we're speaking together, but when you're teaching, it has to come from the diaphragm. Okay. Does the rhythm of your voice reinforce the rhythm of the class? You have to change it up. If you're teaching a dynamic class, your voice has to be dynamic. If you're teaching a slower, gentle class, then your voice has to match that as well. It's an art. Teaching is an art and it takes practice. So give yourself that time. Teach as many people as you can. Always practice teaching and practice with live people. It's very hard these days. I know everything is happening more and more online, but do more Zoom or Skype classes if you can. At least there's a little bit more interaction, and do more live classes if you can. Posture and gestures as well. So we've talked about this already. Does your body language convey openness? Okay. Does your body posture appear to be relaxed and stress-free? What are the habits that you do when you are nervous? Okay. Do you sort of jump around? Do you scratch? For different people, it's different things. So find out what that is. Maybe it will take filming yourself, or just having somebody else watch you and observe you when you teach. Okay, client-centered instruction versus instructor-centered instruction. Okay, what are these two things? We've touched on this a little bit during the past lectures. Let's look at it again. So here on your right, this is more of what an instructor-centered instruction looks like. And it's really a one-way conversation. It's really from teacher to student. It's almost like the student has no say in it. It's like a drill. The flow is going only from one way. And the class priorities are knowledge of exercise specialty, knowledge of teaching techniques, knowledge of learning styles, and ability to perform specific exercises. So very technical. When it's client-centered instruction, it's more of a two-way flow. The teacher is giving the instruction and constantly getting feedback from the student. So it's a loop. And there's focus on other things as well, not just technical details of movement or technical details of the class. So what are we looking at? We're looking at things like, as a teacher, we're looking at things like things that will make the student more comfortable, things that can contribute to making this a more making this a better experience for the student. So see, two-way communication. This includes the physical environment. So maybe I can dim the lights. Will that help? Possibly in Shavasana. So thinking about the lighting. The where the light source is coming from as well, because sometimes if the light source is coming directly from above and you're lying down doing poses from your back, and the light could be very glaring. Okay, so in client-centered instruction, you are if you have the ability to control the physical room and aspects, physical aspects, to make a better experience, then you do that. Temperature, the temperature of the studio or the room, the ability of the students to hear you and see you as the instructor. Okay. So like I said, tone of voice, making your voice interesting, inflections, and also coming from the diaphragm, the voice coming from the diaphragm, and not just speaking like this. Okay, now we will start the yoga class. Let's place our hands in prayer pose. Okay, so it's more like the student has to give you more energy. It's the other way around. When you're teaching, you are giving the energy, or at least holding the energy of the room. In client-centered instruction, so the teacher or the instructor is looking at the group dynamics as well. What are the needs of my students? What are their interests? You use a variety of teaching styles, so you don't stick to, okay, this is how I learned this breathing technique, this is how I learned this asana, therefore this is what I will teach. You have to think of the most effective way to convey the instruction or the message. So adapting at all times. Establishing relationships. And also, as an instructor, you have an interest in the participant or the student having a positive experience. Cool. Did we finish that? Yes. Okay, so types of learners. So students don't learn the same way. There are visual learners, there are verbal auditory learners, and there are kinesthetic or tactile learners. So there are, in other words, there are some people who will learn by seeing, by demonstrating. That's how they learn best. And they look at the visual cues. It says here, visual learner prefers to learn through sight. They can learn specifics by watching demonstrations. Overstimulation from a visual perspective can be a deterrent for these individuals. So it is the first, the sense of sight is their go-to sense. It is think of it as the most dominant. The brain, the way the brain is wired, that's the first thing that they go to. So that's the first thing that they resonate with. Whereas verbal auditory learner. So this type of learner prefers to learn through hearing or listening, often analytical and responds to verbal instructions. The instructor's tone of voice and speech are a major factor to learning. External noise or music can aid in learning or serve as a distraction if not used as a part of planned routine. So these individuals respond very well to very technical instruction, very specific. So even if their eyes are closed, because your instruction is very detailed, they will be able to do the asana, do the movement very, very well, just by listening. You want to include in your instruction um, the breath, the instruction, and then the detail. So, for example, inhale, lift your arms up, slightly bending back from the top of your back. Okay, so that's very clear. You start with the breath. What am I doing? I'm inhaling. What is the instruction? Bend back. Okay. And then what are the details? The details are the other things to add to the movement or other things that I should be thinking about. Okay, so but you create a priority for the instructions: breath, instruction, and then the details. It sounds clearer that way. It's more organized, especially to the verbal auditory learner, rather than doing it the opposite way. Let's try it the opposite way. First, I'll say it again. Breath, instruction, detail, and then I'll mix it up, and you can see for yourself which one is clearer. Okay, so here's one. Inhale, lift your arms up, bend back, open your chest, bring the shoulders back. Okay, number 2. Let's open our backs, open the chest, shoulders back, inhaling while we're inhaling, and bend back. Okay, so in the first example, I had breath, instruction, detail. In the second one, I just mixed it all up. I started with the detail, the breath, and then the instruction. Okay, so when the verbal instruction is clear, this is what the verbal or auditory learner responds to. And they respond well to music as well. They have strong reaction to the music. The visual learners, not so much. I mean, they can, if they don't like the music, it's fine. If they like the music, it's fine. With the auditory learner, if they like the music, they will really love it and it will help them in what they're doing. If they don't like the music, it will be a distraction for them. Or if there's external noise, like traffic or lots of people chatting next door while they're meditating, they will be disturbed by it. The third type of learner is the kinesthetic or tactile learner. So this is the person who likes to be adjusted all the time. Oh, I really love it when somebody comes and adjusts me. Why? Because they learn best by doing. So they learn best by doing and with physical assistance from the instructor. Okay. Let's move on to stages of learning. You can think of this as well as beginners, intermediates, and advanced. And the way that you teach and communicate with beginners, intermediates, and advanced is quite different because they are different stages in their learning and they mean different things. So the beginner stage is sort of the cognitive stage. The individual first has to think about how to perform the skill before it becomes automatic. It is critical to understand the sequence of movements and gain a mental and visual image of the proper execution of the skill. So this is the beginning stage. The student is still discovering everything. Okay, what's a warrior one? Oh, okay. Is it arms up here or is it arms down here? And how many degrees do I place my right leg? How far back should my left leg be? What angle should it be? How low should I be? Okay, so they're still learning everything. The second stage, the affective or associative stage, here, this is more the intermediate stage. So one enters this stage once one masters the basic mechanics and fundamentals, and can then focus on practice and repetition. So you can simply give the name of the pose, for example, warrior one, take your right leg to the front and lift your arms up, and just minimal instruction, very minimal instruction. So here the student has already mastered the pose. So they only need short reminders. Or maybe not quite mastered it, still learning it, but they have an idea in their head already. This is warrior one, this is warrior two, this is standing forward bend, etc., etc. This is triangle. Okay, you get it. So the third stage is the autonomic stage. I once went to a class. It was a master class, and it was actually with Sri Dharma Mitra, and it was so beautiful. He was just walking around and telling us what to do, or not telling us what to do. He was just telling us the names of the poses in Sanskrit. So he wasn't saying, inhale, right leg to the front, lift your arms, nothing. Just, he would just say pose after pose in Sanskrit. And because all of the students were already teachers, they were all here in the autonomic stage. And what we were there for was really just to feel the ambience, to practice together. And it was just to practice and to enjoy, not so much to learn step by step, because everybody has passed that stage already. So how do we adapt our teaching throughout these three levels? When it's the beginner stage, so cognitive stage, there needs to be more verbal instruction. There also needs to be more demonstrations. So at this stage, you will be demonstrating a lot on your mat, and you will be giving out a lot of details. If you have a copy of the manual, the asana, the yoga teacher training manual, in the asana portion there, you would be going through all of those points for each pose, for example. When it's the affective or associative stage, meaning intermediates, you have now less instruction. Maybe you can give more details. So it's more like, how do I go deeper in this pose? How do I perfect this pose? So little tips and tricks to master the pose. Or perhaps you're giving different variations. Especially in the third stage, you're giving like more variations. Okay, so here the focus of instruction shifts to learning the basics and learning all the details step by step, to just giving more adequate time for practice. The key here is refining the skill rather than learning the skill. I already know how to do warrior one, warrior two, and trikonasana. How do I make it better? How do I go deeper? Okay, so also the students getting better as well. So the way that they perform in the three stages is also very different. So the last one is the autonomic stage. So here you are like more like a coach, and the student knows what to do. Maybe you will and you're just giving the basics of, okay, this is what we will do today. Maybe you're just giving out the sequence of poses, and just allowing everyone to practice. And when there is a need to correct or add more detail, then you step in and add more detail. And variations as well, giving variations. How can we be more creative in this pose? Okay, this bit is now very interesting. participant personality traits, and the impact on the instructor. It's also a good time to take a break. So if you need to, just pause this video and press play when you are ready to come back. If you're back, welcome back. We are continuing with participant personality traits and the impact on the instructor. So you will encounter this in your class. Different personalities come out. So let's go through them one by one and how we can spot them and what could be a strategy that we can employ to keep the harmony in the class. So number one, you have the expressive participant. This is the talker. This person can be quite distracting. They like to speak out during the class. They're chatting with other participants as well, or sometimes they are speaking out about their needs, etc. So obviously it could be quite distracting. As an instructor, as a yoga teacher, you can reinforce the class policies. So you can remind the students, you can remind the particular student that this is a space where we enjoy some silence. So maybe we can discuss their specific needs or have conversation afterwards, after the class. And we want to reinforce maybe the meditative state, for example. So you can remind them about these things during the class, or you can maybe speak to them after the class. Just say, I noticed how, you start with asking them how they are, perhaps. Ask them how they are enjoying the class, just to make conversation. And then maybe say something like, I noticed that you had a lot of things to share during the class. Normally we reserve this for afterwards because it can be distracting sometimes. So if I can just ask you to reserve conversation for after the class, that would be really great. And then just continue normal conversation with them. You don't want to embarrass them or anything. The assistant, number two. So the assistant who likes to be your assistant. They like to correct other students and they like to monopolize your attention. They're not happy if you're not looking at them all the time. So what can you do? If they are performing skills correctly, you can use them to demonstrate. Sometimes that happens. You ask them to demonstrate and then they start teaching. So don't let them take over the class. You could position them as well where they cannot see other participants, therefore they can't correct the other participants. So where would that be? It would be at the very front and center, because they won't be able to see the students behind them. They'll probably enjoy that position anyway, because people will be watching them. Okay, so it can work like that. They could demonstrate for you. The third type of student you have is the challenger. So this participant expresses verbally or non-verbally, so with their body language, that they're not interested or not being challenged enough. In other words, they're showing you that they are bored. So they're showing you a sign and you can respond. So you can show them modifications to accommodate their skill level. So you can show them some variations that they can do. Sometimes you can also have some space in the class for them to do their own variation. So just give them the cue. If you feel, for example, you're in downward facing dog, and normally in downward facing dog, you just want 5 long breaths, ujjayi breaths in stillness. But you see that this person is like wriggling around because they want to do the downward facing dog another way. They want to feel it more in their body. So what you can do, you can say, okay, everyone, let's exhale into downward facing dog. Let's take 5 long, deep Ujjayi breaths. Stay nice and still. And then after the 5 breaths, you can say, well, you can have them rest or you can keep them in down dog. And then you can say something like, and now if you'd like to explore this pose, lift one leg or pedal your legs, go ahead and explore this pose now for a few more breaths. Okay, so you're giving a chance for them to explore the pose. Perhaps as well, somewhere in the class, maybe somewhere in the middle or somewhere at the end, you can have a few minutes for students to do some other poses that they want to do that was not included in your sequence. Like before Shavasana, you can say, okay, now it's time for Shavasana. But if you would like to practice any additional poses, feel free to do so right now before, and when you're finished, just relax into Shavasana. So you're making it more of an open class. So remember, it's always a two-way thing, two-way communication. They're showing you that they're bored, so you're giving them leeway to explore their creativity. The emotional participant, this participant is always looking for positive reinforcement, and they are always sort of looking at challenges or barriers. I can't do this pose because something hurts, this hurts, that one's too hard. So they are, well, giving you excuses, plainly speaking. So what you can do is you don't want to just always give in. You want to show empathy, so you want to listen to what they're saying, but at the same time, as the instructor, you want to motivate them. So have an empathic ear, listen to what they're saying, acknowledge what they're saying, and then perhaps you can encourage them to have a goal, to set a goal for the practice or for the pose. So to get through it and to strengthen them a little bit. So let's say they're in downward facing dog, and you're staying there for 10 breaths, and after 2 breaths they collapse into child's pose, and they say, I can't do it anymore. Just say, I see that you're struggling with this today. Maybe give it 3 more breaths and then go into child's pose. Come on, you can do it. So there's a balance between giving an empathic ear and encouraging them. So not just saying, okay, you're spent, give up. They want to be challenged. They want to be encouraged. And it's your role to encourage. Some behaviors to avoid. So you don't want to assume that the participants will respond to your preferred learning style. So just because you're visual doesn't mean that all of your students are visual. So you want to change up the way that you teach according to your students. If they will learn better this way, then that's what you deliver. You can maybe record yourself and listen to yourself when you teach. For example, when you teach meditation, are you always saying visualize, 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 imagine, imagine, imagine? That works very well for the visual person, but not for the other two. So you can change it up a bit. Visualize a light at the center of your heart. Feel and sense this expanding, resonate throughout your whole body. So you use different words that will resonate with different individuals. Avoid teaching predominantly to one learning style. You want to employ all learning styles. Avoid using touch as cue for all participants. So acknowledge that some participants do not want to be touched. Always ask for Always ask for permission before you go ahead and physically correct somebody. And that's every time, not just at the beginning of the class, but every time you come to adjust a student with your body, so with physical touch, you always have to ask for permission. In fact, that's a rule in Yoga Alliance. Okay, 7 keys to achieving achieving hospitality in the classroom. Arrive early, welcome everyone, learn their names. This can be very challenging, but you can do it. Be curious, ask questions, be curious and interested. Be practical. Okay, so teach what needs to be taught in the manner that is most accessible. Be available as well, approachable. If the students have questions, where can they reach you? How can they reach you? Can they speak to you after class? Or do you prefer communicating with them via email, etc.? It's up to you. Find your boundaries and your communication pathways that works for you and for your students. And be considerate as well. So you're there to motivate, to set goals, but you're also there to have an empathic ear. Delivering cues successfully. Okay. I was going to skip, but I'm not going to skip. Okay. Let's talk about safety and technique cues. So, safety and technique cues are verbal and visual, focusing on body awareness and addressing is alignment correct, positioning, and breathing. So you're checking for how your student is aligned in this asana, how they are positioned, and you're checking their breathing. Breathing is very, very important in yoga practice. This is how we move the energy through our bodies, through the breath. So you don't have to correct all of your participants all of the time in every single asana. You want to also allow them to just explore their bodies without having to be corrected all the time. If perhaps you've been correcting one student in the same class in this 1 hour, you've been correcting the student, you've done it 3 times already, but they still keep making mistakes, just leave it a while. They just need more time to practice. Save your corrections for the next class. Help them along. One person can only take so many corrections in 1 hour. Prioritize who you are giving the feedback or the correction to. So the person who is in most danger, so let's say they're doing something dangerous where they can actually fall or hurt somebody, that's the person that you correct. Or if they're doing something that is improper alignment, not proper or incorrect alignment, and if you don't correct them, it could be a bad habit. It could lead to a bad habit. So then you correct that. So always prioritizing. So safety first, and then maybe perhaps the next one you correct for is the person who is starting to learn bad habits. And then there are other corrections like superficial corrections, very minute things like your finger is not straight or the direction of your eyes. So very minor things. Those are the last things that you would correct. How do we give this correction? So your first tool in your toolbox, your first go-to is just general feedback. So let's say you're doing Cobra, and we all know that in Cobra, we want to keep our shoulders away from the ears, down and back with the elbows bent. But one student is doing this with the arms straight and shoulders by their ears. So let's say that student is student A. So instead of going straight away, student A, don't do that, do this. You can address the whole class. So you're giving the feedback to the whole class. Okay, so let's come into Cobra pose. Don't forget to roll your shoulders back and down and bend your elbows. And then the person, student A, who was doing this, maybe can get this cue and correct themselves. So you're talking to the whole class. If that doesn't work, then you do the second, which is indirect feedback. So you add body language. Maybe you can go closer to the, you add body language. You can look at the person, so that now it's more specific. Okay. But you're still not identifying the person. The third one is direct feedback. So you can call the person by name, or you can walk towards the person. I like to whisper. I like to walk towards the person and maybe whisper their name so that they know I'm speaking with them. But the whole class doesn't need to know. It just depends on your group dynamics. For example, in a yoga teacher training, the first 5 lessons, I am very careful about that. Towards the end of the training, the group dynamic has changed. Everyone is very close. They're all friends. And even if you shout out, student A, keep your shoulders down, they don't mind because they're amongst friends already. But you wouldn't do that during the first 5 days of training, for example. So it's just, again, depending on the dynamics of the group. Sometimes it's also how you are as a teacher. Are you more of a light-hearted, casual teacher, so they don't really mind if you correct them? Or are you quite serious and you're this sort of scary type that if you give a correction, somebody gets really embarrassed? Okay. The third type, you can also do tactile feedback, which is the 4th type. So actually, first ask permission. Is it okay if I adjust you? And then you adjust them manually. Where do you want to position the limb? Or you help them with the movement, the speed of the movement, or the range of motion. And the last one, I find this really effective. It's deferred feedback. So it's after the class. So you just take them after the class. It works well as well when you have time to do this. So in a retreat setting, for example, it works very well because you have a lot of time to spend together. It doesn't really work if all you have is the 1 hour with the students. You can't keep them back because they have other things to do. When you, of course, it's very different when you are correcting teacher trainees and you're correcting students who have other goals in their class. They want to come to class because they want to relax or they want to meditate and not really to be very precise in their alignment. Okay. But some people who come to a regular 1 hour class also want to be very good with their alignment. So again, students' needs. So deferred feedback is when you have time outside of the class to go through some of the poses where they need correction. That's good because you can actually explain it to them. You can show them in your own body what they're doing. You can show them in your body, demonstrate what needs to be done, and then you have one-on-one time with them, in other words. So that works very well in a retreat setting, maybe not as well with a 1 hour class, and not everybody needs it as well. Okay, so it just depends on the goals of your students. All right. So use discretion with tactile instructions when you're adjusting students manually. Make sure that you ask for permission. Always respect your participants' personal space. Ask permission before doing any hands-on assistance, even if you have done so previously with the individual. So even if the last class they were okay with being adjusted, maybe this class they're not, they just want to enjoy the class, or whatever reason, it has to be respected. And it goes for every pose. So just because you adjusted them in triangle doesn't mean that we're now in the next pose. That it doesn't mean that permission is continuous. You have to ask again, in other words. All right, so this, I would say that this whole lecture really boils down to these next two or three slides, the pratyahara cues. Okay, well, I just coined this term, pratyahara cues. Pratyahara means withdrawal of the senses. I hope you got that. So it's one of the 8 limbs of Patanjali, pratyahara. Think of it as going inwards, going inwards. So I'll tell you where I got this from. Because I've been teaching for very long, I've been teaching for over 16 years, and I have been doing yoga teacher training, so training other teachers for over 6 years. I have seen many classes, over nearly 300 classes now, and some classes, some classes that I see, it's like, wow, that's perfectly instructed. They demonstrate very well. They know the breath, they know the instruction, and everything's perfect. But something is missing. It doesn't feel like a yoga class. It just feels like I went to a stretching class. It was very much in the physical dimension, and that was all the dimension that there was to it. It was one-dimensional. It was a physical class. There was nothing deep about it. It didn't feel like a yoga class. And I thought, okay, how can I help them? How can I help these teachers? What is missing in their class that they can incorporate to make it more of a rounded class, a yoga class? I feel like I went inwards. There's more of a spiritual dimension in this class. So I thought, aha, what's missing is their pratyahara cues. They're not using these words. Okay, so to have a more rounded class, you would like to add this to your class. And this list is not exhaustive. So by all means, please add to this. Some of these words will resonate with you, and some of them not so much. So some of them will resonate with your students and some will not. So see what works for you and what works for your students. Listen to your body, feel your breath, meditate in the pose. Here, breathe in, breathe out. It's not breathe in, breathe out, because breathe in, breathe out it's breathe in, breathe out, because then that would be a deep, long breath. Close your eyes. Immediately that takes you inwards. Notice, brings you to awareness. Be aware. That's also a nice pratyahara cue. Breathe into energy, the chakra. Let go of thoughts. Sense the energy. Visualize the chakra. Visualize the energy. tune into the mind, tune into what this pose is saying. So add a different dimension into your yoga class. If this is not coming easy to you, perhaps it will come easy later on when you yourself have more experience in yoga, not just teaching yoga, but in the practice of yoga. So just be open to this wonderful experience. These are motivational cues that you can use as well. You can go over this and use them. However, I do want to end the lecture with the pratyahara cues, as they are really quite important. And I also mentioned this in the first lecture on teaching methodologies. The school suggests, so that you can have more of a holistic class, more of a rounded class, we suggest that you also add a dedication at the beginning and the end of the class. Add pranayama, meditation, visualizations as well, so that it's not just a stretch class, so that you're giving more dimension to your yoga class and your teaching, and as well using these pratyahara cues. Okay, so keep practicing, keep learning, and keep teaching. Thank you very much. Namaste.